Sophie, thank you so much for joining us today. We know it's a really busy time following the Channel 5 documentary about the Princess of Wales, and her wearing your Izzy Star earrings. So I'm aware that you were in that. That was really exciting to see.
Thank you.
So at Mind Thrive, we're deeply committed to breaking the stigma around mental health topics, including suicide. So we're really interested in the work that you're doing to give voice to people struggling with issues like this.
Yeah, I love your commitment to raising awareness of suicide and mental health. And it comes from such a deep personal place as well. So we'd love it if you share your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's making awareness. I think that we, in not just our society, in our country, in many countries, the word suicide is pretty terrifying to say, let alone ask if anybody is feeling that way. And it's probably what we don't ask enough. We all talk about our mental health and ask people how they are, and maybe use the word struggling quite a lot. And it's, what does that struggle mean? So, suicide is, it's happening, every second. So it's really important to keep that awareness going. So thank you for saying that. Izzy is my cousin. And yeah, I think we've all got that very, very special person in our family that we're sort of honing in more on. And she was just that one. She was always the one that rallied around everybody. She was always the one that would be proud of everyone and let them know. She would be the one that if you needed a hug, she would drive, with her mum for 20 minutes to come and hug you. And, she's a very, very special soul. So when you lose those souls, it's totally life shattering. We all go through the grief and the process of loss, but that person just is there all the time. And for me, she is always there, because obviously her name is every day within my business, and she helped me an awful lot. So I moved from Scotland down to Ascot. I think that was 2022, possibly 23. I'm trying to remember my dates. And it was really near her. So all my family are from Maidenhead and Cookham. And then I moved to the Ascot area, and she would come and help me make earrings and jewelry, and it helped me send orders. And she was just incredible. And she was so proud of me. And I really felt that, she would often say that. And it was a real encouragement. So I know that, she was still here, she would definitely be a big part of the business. And she is, even though she isn't. And she was such a massive rugby player. She just absolutely loved rugby. She played for, England Touch. She was a coach at Maidenhead Rugby Club, like her mum was. She encouraged so many people to get into sport. And yeah, she's just a fantastic person. So it's it can be those people that you don't necessarily think are the ones that are, necessarily suicidal or struggling, or perhaps their depression and anxiety has got a lot worse. They tend to very much mask that to please everybody else, because we think they're not the type that would be sad. So yeah, it was she's just such a soul.
Oh, Sophie, I'm just hearing what a warm-hearted, loving person she was, and how much an integral part of your life she was. And I think you make an important point. When I was doing training, they shared with us, it was just a YouTube video, and it said, suicide does not look like you think. And it was the last post that people put, or videos that they put online, looking joyful. There was no sense of what was going on for them from that little snapshot into their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Izzy had a wonderful party with her friends. She had a little party the day before she took her life. And I'm so glad she did, and left this world just, hopefully very elevated, and she'd been around such, wonderful people of her friends. Maybe it was a type of goodbye. A lot of people, they really think about suicide for a long time. It's not necessarily just a something that happens one day, although it can, and I think that she had thought about it for a long time. But yeah, it's it was so great that she managed to have that time with all of her friends. I love that she did that before. Really love that.
Was there any sense of things not being okay for her?
Yeah, absolutely. She did. She did really suffer. She had anorexia, which was during lockdown. Really struggled with that, and really struggled with depression. And it came in waves. She, it was. She just struggled more than others, which is what people who, obviously, people who are very heavily depressed and suicidal feel. And I never, like I said, she was such a happy, outgoing, loving, her friends or her family person that you don't recognize it enough because of the way they mask. And yeah, there was times, of course, when she came to stay in Scotland, actually, she'd been having a really bad time, so she came to stay with me, and we did lots of earring making, and she got on so well with my goddaughter, Rebecca, same age, and she reminds me so much of her now. And they were just fantastic. So it really helped Izzy having a friend here while she was up. Um, and new surroundings and new people can give you that hope and inspire you to keep going. And I think she really got that as well when she was here, because we're her family. So she just loved being in Scotland with her Scottish family as well as everyone else. But there's something magical about being in the Scottish Highlands, definitely.
Yeah, there is. I agree. Oh, Sophie, it's an enormous loss, isn't it? And it's so tragic. How old
Yeah.
was she?
She was 17. Yeah, she was 17. I know it's so young, and it's younger. This is not, the people are taking their lives much younger as well. And it's such a loss. It really, really is. And I think I never properly really managed to do a lot of grieving, because obviously the situation that happened where, we obviously named a pair of earrings after her, and then the connection with the princess and what happened from there, it just, that was it. She died in the April. It was the June that she met Izzy's mum. And then the October, she wore the earrings for World Mental Health Day. And it just constant, 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 constant. And my phone just constantly pings up saying Izzy Star, Izzy Star, Izzy Star all the time. So I don't think I've really had that time to properly maybe process it. But then I don't know if I need that either. I think a lot of the time we can be a bit like, oh, we must process it, we must do this, we must do that. But I don't know whether or not what I was doing, being immersed in the business and remembering her and working with Brave Mind, was sort of my therapy and my way of getting through it. Because it's disbelief. It's definite disbelief. Like you can't, like that was the way it was when we knew that she'd gone. It was disbelief, and I think maybe I still think it isn't real. So
I think you make some important points about grief, and I think we find our own path through it. And it sounds like, in some ways, the business suddenly getting so busy. And it allowed you to connect with her in a way, is what I'm hearing, because it was all about Izzy and integrating her into your present, which I think is our task when we lose someone. How do we find our new way of relating to them? And that is a painful process. But equally, there's something about activity helping us to avoid getting stuck in grief.
Yeah.
That you were actually...
Yeah, and our minds just going over it and over it and over it. And we, you know, when I think you're right. So it was that the business was so busy and I was immersed in that. Whereas sometimes when someone dies, they die, it's awful. And then you have a funeral and then you just have to get on with life, which is obviously what we did do with Izzy. But I think that the situation that happened kept her so much more alive for our whole family. And I'm so glad that it did, because she should never have, you know, her light will always be there, you know. So I think that was really helpful.
There's something there, isn't there, about her light. And I love that it's jewellery. There's something so symbolic about what jewellery can be, and so precious.
Absolutely.
And by making these, I think what you're doing is there's a memory for you and your family, but also people who buy them, they may buy them for all sorts of connections. And if it's to do with suicide, then they sort of connect with you. I don't know. I think connection is a really important part of grief.
Absolutely, because we all they open up a conversation alone. So if you say, "Oh, I love your dress," and then you're like, "Oh, I got it from such and such, and it's from here." We do that with jewelry as well, anyway. And with the earrings, I think they open up the story. So somebody who's bought them knows the backstory, and they'll then tell that person. And we feel like it's giving people the opportunity to start a full conversation off the back of a pair of earrings about mental health. So it might be that this story gets told, and then someone is like, "Yeah, you know what? My daughter's really, really not in a good place," or my husband, or lots of people, where they've got parents, children, friends, siblings that have tried to take their life and they don't necessarily know how to talk about that, and that opens up that conversation. So the earrings actually have the story that can start off to help somebody else that it doesn't necessarily know how to talk.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about something incredibly important here, because with grief, sometimes we can go within ourselves, and there is a time for that. There is a time for sort of retreating and mourning in that way. But talking is really important. And with suicide, there's stigma. We can hold on to shame. There's so many unanswered questions as well. And so it's harder to have those conversations sometimes. So I really like that the earring represents something that opens up, that just kind of tries to push through that and opens up conversations.
Yeah, completely. Because of course, we try not to use the word, a committal, because obviously suicide was, wrong for so many years, and you were committing suicide. And, we really tried to not use that word, because it was, people weren't allowed to do that. And so it's now, the fact that and it was shame. People were, we felt shame when that happened. Families probably who know that somebody has taken their life probably still haven't talked about it within their families, because that's what it was perceived at, is the fact that it was, how could someone possibly do that? We're such a strong family. Why didn't they come to us? Or, but it's not about that. It's such a complex mental health.
It certainly is. And I'm heartened to hear you say that you don't say commit, because I don't like that word, committing suicide. It does come from historically it being a crime. Whereas
it's
sort of,
incredible.
death by suicide or took their life by suicide. I just wonder in your journey of grief and discovery about this, if you've encountered sort of myths about suicide.
I wouldn't say myths, but it's definitely. We were sitting in the office about 2 or 3 weeks before a suicide prevention day, and we were going through what messages we want to try and help. Not just about saying, "Oh, it's Suicide Prevention Day," but really, what can we do? And we decided that we would do this sort of carousel of really important things to notice the difference in people's behaviour that somebody might see, that somebody would never have been taught or they'd know. And so we were talking about mental health, mental health, mental health. And then I was like, we're not really, okay, of course it's mental health, but we need to talk about the word suicide. And of course we just took our pens and we were like scrubbing things out, going, of course, that is the message. I think that the myth is that, it was never talked about, and it still is not talked about enough, because that word is so strong and it's so terrifying.
Well, that is a commonly held myth. If we talk about suicide, people are more likely to take their own lives, and that is not the case at all. You have to be mentally ill to take your own life. That's also a myth.
And also, people who talk about suicide won't go through with it. That's a myth as well.
Absolutely not true, because the more attempts people make, the more likely it is to take place. And people sometimes do try and introduce it into a conversation, and it can be shut down. And I think it's so important to try and create that space where there's opportunity. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it can be impulsive. Everybody's story is different.
Oh, completely. Like, you can imagine, a husband and wife, or one comes home and says, actually, I don't love you anymore, and I want a divorce, or whatever it is, a very instant sort of, something that they don't think is going to happen. That type of thing can just completely tip somebody over the edge, and then that happens. So people don't have to be, unstable mentally, and it's so many different situations. You're so right. The myths are so silly.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways that we use at work. One of the models that's popular within the NHS is one called Joiner's model, and that's the name of the person who invented it. And this is less to do with the impulsive side of things and more to do with a sort of a build up to it. And there's like 3 key areas. So it's like 3 circles that overlap, and the bit in the middle is the sort of the highest risk area. And the first circle is called thwarted belonging, which means like just feeling profoundly alone and cut off, like you don't belong anywhere. Another circle is perceived burdensomeness. So this idea that you believe that you're a burden to others, you're not helping or of use, if you like. And then the third one is capability of suicide. So when the fear of death lessens, and that can be through exposure, through trauma, and it can be through previous attempts as well, which busts the myth of the call for help not being serious, because sometimes the attempts at suicide are a desensitization leading up to the event. So we use that for 2 reasons. We use it for assessing risk with people, and we also use it for building care management plans, which might be quite helpful. So thinking about, if there's a sense of thwarted belonging, it's like, well, let's start to think about how you can connecting into a community, a family, a society.
I think when people share their stories, there's often a profound sense of helplessness, hopelessness, loss of control. Sometimes people want to reconnect perhaps with their loved one that's passed. Sometimes it can be revenge. And complexity within families. It's diverse, and I think as clinicians, our role is about being curious and actually being able to create a space where people dare to talk about that. And you know, that's not just for therapists. That's I think a call for us as a society as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just sort of, what you said about a myth there about people that talk about suicide and they're feeling it, think that that's what's then going to happen, you know. And if those are the things that we're taught in society, then it's just such a wrong message. So yeah, it's very, very, very complex and very diverse.
Yes. So I'm just going to go through the stats, Sophie, because they're harrowing. So every 40 seconds, someone takes their own life in the world. And that's more than 700,000 people a year dying by suicide. And that's from the WHO. In England alone, there were 5,219 suicides that were registered in 2021. And it's the fourth leading cause of death amongst 15 to 19-year-olds.
Yes, and men aged 45 to 49 remain the group that's most at risk, according to Samaritans. And another high-risk group is autistic people as well. That's according to Autistica. In 2022, they did some research that suggested it's 9 times higher. So
yeah,
really?
I mean, it's I think with, you know, I hear, you know, there's quite a few of my friends with autistic children, and they just don't get the help. They don't. There isn't enough help in schools and in general for children with and adults with autism. There just isn't at all. And it's quite interesting to hear that statistic on that. But I think for men, I think that's just, I don't know. I mean, is that pressure? I mean, is it, you know, where, you know, why is that at that age group in men?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it tends to be the midlife crisis time. When they make a suicide attempt, it can be absolutely serious. So they are more likely, tragically, to follow through. And I think men, it's so difficult for them to start to talk about their feelings. There's not generally a space for them to do that. And I know with Mindstrive, that's something that's really stirred our hearts, because men are much more likely to access a resource online rather than actually have to talk to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're so right. You know, it's a stigma of, you know, for men, it's, you know, stiff upper lip, don't talk about it, you know, that type of upbringing. You know, boys don't cry, all of that stuff. And yeah, it's very, I think, you know, women get together, don't they? They talk, they open up. That's just never been part of the man's psyche or what groups of men do. And that's something that has to change.
There's some great charities out there that are sort of stirring things up. There's one called Andy's Man Club, which I really like. There's a local one to us, something about men in sheds or something like that, where they go and have a cup of tea and build something and, you know, have a conversations in different ways.
Yeah, and it might kick something off. It's not necessarily, because I think a lot of us think that we're all sitting on a chair and there are groups of guys sit around like an American film. And it's like, right, okay, Steve, do you want to start, you know, and talk? And it just doesn't have to be like that. It can literally be like you say, that, you know, somebody starts up a repair shop in the town and it's purely for men and they can just speak. And because loneliness is such, depression, you know, and suicide, you know, pressure at work, not performing, marriage is breaking down. Children, you know, you've got children with learning difficulties, special needs, or autism. So I think that, you know, for men, they feel very helpless in what they can do and what they can bring. So these sort of man clubs are fantastic, and it's just so sad to hear those numbers of that age group.
I think it's important for people to know that there is support out there. So there's Papyrus in the UK, which supports young people thinking about suicide. There's the Samaritans, of course, which we're more familiar with. And there's Calm. It's a campaign against living miserably. And that's actually about supporting men in crisis. And many local areas will have cafes that offer support and spaces to connect. And so at MindStrive, whilst we're not an emergency resource, we are a resource available 24/7 that people can access to start to think about some of their challenges. And we would hope that actually the earlier you start with something like that, you can hopefully start to avoid the build-up of distress.
Well, I think your platform is fantastic for people with, organisations, having the memberships for their employees to be able to access.
Suicide is something that has the potential to touch all of us. It's enormously painful for those left behind. And it's often hard to know, or for people to know where to start in offering support. And I think it's about giving people space to share those feelings and demonstrating that you can tolerate listening. It's a parallel process here. It's the same process that we need when we're with people who are in despair, holding space for them, listening, demonstrating compassion, not judgment, not, well, have you thought about how this would affect your family? Because these thoughts can evoke powerful feelings for people. Actually, that's not where we start. It's not where we start at all. But there is a reality that it affects those left behind.
And I think there's a parallel there, Georgina, between how we listen to somebody who's feeling suicidal. And it's quite a hard thing to do, not to rush in and rescue. But I think the same applies for people who are bereft as well. So, Sophie, I just wondered, was there a time when somebody really listened to you, or was there something somebody did that you just thought, that was just what I needed at that time?
Yeah, I think my sister is very brilliant with that. She's a real checker-inner, listener, understanding. She is absolutely incredible. She really, really is, and she's always checking in on us as a family, or just thinking about how something, even just with how overwhelmed I am with this sort of wave of orders and whatnot. She's always saying, it must be overwhelming, and I hope you're okay, and that you're doing something, to have a bit of downtime at the same time. And and it's those really, I know obviously all my friends are absolutely incredible. They're always asking and checking in, and I'm very similar with them as well. And I just think that's so lovely to have that group and that around you. It really, really is.
Again, the theme that's coming up for me as I listen to you is about connecting, because I think with grief, we can be so pulled into disconnecting, hiding ourselves away, and the healing can happen in a hug.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well is that, giving people that space, that's fine, but it's just tapping in and saying to them, you don't want a response. You don't have to message me back, and you can say no, we'll go for a coffee, and you can change your minute, you change your mind last minute. It's just, I think it's just going with how someone feels, and every day is so different for them, when they're grieving, and also every day is so different for someone when they're grieving their mental health, because I think that mental health is a state of grief as well. It's such it's just what our mind can say and do to us is just beyond.
For me, when I've been bereaved, having connection has been so important, and it hasn't actually required talking about something heavy. Sometimes just going out with a friend and hearing about their world takes you outside of the pain of that grief for a little while and gives you a little bit of respite. So I always say to people, don't be afraid to talk about yourself, because actually it's a really nice relief to hear about other people's worlds.
Yeah, and you know, relishing in the joy of someone's promotion, or you know, it's yeah, it is. It's connection. You're so right, and there's a lot of people that lost that, obviously, from COVID, and I think that has been so detrimental. I mean, I personally think that we have a mental health pandemic, you know, from COVID for sure, of where we had such disconnection. One that I hope I'll never have to see again in my lifetime. But the kids really struggled. Adults struggled, absolutely, but the kids, they, they struggled so much, you know. And Izzy was one of them who really struggled during lockdown.
It disconnected us, didn't it? And I would say Ruth and I are writing a book on connection at the moment, because it's so fundamental to mental health.
And some people don't know how to do it. You know, they don't know how to connect and feel and speak and open up, because they've maybe not been brought up like that, or they've had a really disconnecting family, or you know. So to be able to actually pick up a book and read about connection and actually really deep dive into it, that's amazing that you're doing that.
Well, it's coming. Quite when it will arrive. We will let you know when it does.
And it will come at the exact right time. It will.
Oh, Sophie, I just want to say thank you so much for your honesty and for sharing your story with us. It's such an important story, such an important voice, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I mean, I think it's I think that it's time to be a bit more honest, isn't it? You know, and actually, you know, when we talk about the fact that we've got a sore foot or a sore leg, there's nothing wrong with saying that you've got a sore mind.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, thank you for sharing Izzy's story. That was really brave, really challenging stuff to talk about.